Good evening. I'm your host, Sam Matheny, and alongside me is my co-host, Matt Bruzas. And welcome to part one of special two-part edition of Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from Your Regular Daily Schedule. Let's get right into it. Now, the topic of this special two-part edition is if UWW-TV controlled the NCAA and how we would restructure the major 7 conferences in Division I and why. Part 1 will cover the 3 big divisions, while Part 2 will cover the AAC, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the SEC. And Matt, I think this is a great idea just to redo it all together because this whole thing's been a train wreck for the NCAA.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's been at the forefront for why teams maybe don't get into the college football playoff, or maybe why they don't get into the NCAA tournament, NCAA March Madness tournament. I think it's a great way to maybe put it out there for the future for maybe teams to move from one conference to another. We'll get into this later, but going into who's in and who's out, I think it's great because I think you then put the emphasis on rivalries, you put the emphasis on better geography for the teams, less travel for the teams. I think it could be better for the players overall too.
Yeah, Matt, you said it. The NCAA restructured a lot of conferences these past 10 years, and I really wasn't a big fan of it, so we're going to restructure it ourselves today. And they've been doing it all for the sake of saving money. And the problem is that if they wanted to save money, they would regionalize their conferences.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and we'll get into it more, but I think that's going to be one of the main talking points for why they should restructure it.
We'll begin with our restructure of the Big Ten on this special Part 1 edition of PEOMIOSFYRDS right after this commercial break.
Warhawks know what it takes to become champions. At the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, our student athletes pursue excellence with a determination that inspires everyone on campus. Warhawks are smart. Warhawks are strong. Warhawks value service. We prepare our student athletes for life after college. The University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Come be part of the Warhawk family.
UWW-TV has been an important part of the campus and community since 1980.
Not only providing on-air learning opportunities for broadcast journalists and electronic media production students,
but educating and entertaining our audiences with award-winning news, live sports coverage, original programming,
as well as dedicating the mission to developing creative collaborations throughout campus.
For more information, visit our website, our 24/7 stream, and like us on Facebook.
Check us out because you gotta see what's on UWW-TV.
UW-Whitewater Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
Here at UW-Whitewater Intramural Sports, we have a motto: a sport for everyone and everyone in a sport.
Come on!
Stepped it anyways. Oh, she got that off. They're going to count it.
Had a blast. Always have fun at intramurals.
Every day we strive to go above and beyond that goal by providing healthy exercise, promoting leisure education, and giving students that competitive atmosphere they are looking for.
Yes! Yes!
It's exciting. Brings me back to those high school days with Friday Night Lights.
With our 25 different intramural sports offered, we guarantee that we have a sport for you. Go to our website and find your sport today.
While paper facial coverings can only be used once, other facial coverings should be washed after every use to reduce the risk of spreading germs. Some facial coverings can be laundered, but washing them with soap and water in the bathroom is also an effective and efficient method for disinfecting. The students shown here wore their facial covering until they entered the bathroom, thoroughly washed it with dish soap and water, and brought it to their room to air dry. Always allow your mask to dry completely before reuse. If you do not have dish soap at your disposal, please use the provided hand soap in the community bathrooms.
Welcome back to Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from your regular daily schedule. Our topic this week is if UWW-TV would restructure the major 7 conferences in Division I. Let's start with the Big Ten. And Matt, there's a lot of teams on this list, but we're just going to go over who is in this conference right now. So we have Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and last but not least, Wisconsin. Matt, who gets cut from our list?
So we are going to leave out Rutgers, Maryland, Penn State, and Nebraska, because I think that if you look at Penn State, for example, I believe that they should stay in the Big Ten. I think we should switch. But first and foremost, I like to say this right off the bat. The Big Ten, if it's named the Big Ten, should have 10 teams. And so I believe Penn State should be in the Big Ten because I feel like they've really cemented themselves in the Big Ten Conference. I know they have a lot of baggage, but I believe they've had some pretty big rivalries with Ohio State, Wisconsin, and a lot of other teams as well in the Big Ten. And so I think Penn State should stay in the Big Ten, and I think there's a lot of reasons, and they do a lot of good for the Big Ten.
They do a lot of good for the Big Ten, but I think the reason it didn't make our list was only because they joined a lot less recent than most of these other teams, if I'm correct here. They joined in 1990. And the team I also want to take off the list, like you said, Nebraska. They're one of those teams that has traditionally been in the Big 12 a while back, we should say. And I know a lot of fans would love to see that Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry game on Thanksgiving. So I think that's one of the reasons they need to be out, because they haven't really been relevant in a lot of sports in the past 20 years.
Yeah, and then one of the big ones, Maryland, they've been in the Big Ten for a while. They were good in basketball, but I think a lot of the other sports, they've really fallen off. I think Maryland, when they're on schedule for other teams for football, I think they're a cake. Some teams really think they're a cakewalk, like Ohio State's blowing them out, Wisconsin's blowing them out. I think Penn State's blown them out a couple times as well, previous years. But again, I think aside from last season where Penn State really didn't have that good of a year, I think that they're the only one team that should be back into the Big Ten.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, yeah, like we said earlier, unfortunately they just get cut from the list. And Rutgers, I think they're the worst addition the Big Ten has made in the last 50 years, if I'm just being honest here. They're seemingly so bad in every single sport. Given they were pretty decent and they made the NCAA tournament this year, I believe in the 10 to 12 seed range for basketball, for the men that is. But I think they haven't been consistent. And I think they're way too out east in terms of who should be in this conference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the Big Ten should be focused on the Midwest, the Heartland areas with in the Plains, and then maybe going as far east as Penn State, and that's about it. Rutgers is way too far east. I don't think the Big Ten should span that far, and then Rutgers should be back into the Big East. I think the reason why is because they're so far east and there's so many other teams around them that get the other talent as well. Like if you look at Ohio State, they're the big ones that get most of the recruits that come from east, and they go out west and they recruit heavily as well. They're the reason why that Rutgers has been on a downward spiral in football.
That's correct, Matt. Next up, UWW-TV's restructure of the Big East and then the Big 12. We'll be right back here with more PEOMIOSFYRDS.
On. Flip them off. 91.7 WSUW. 91.7 is a student-run radio station serving the Whitewater area with a variety of original programs, live sports broadcasting, community events, and more. So turn us on 91.7 FM or stream us live at 917theedge.com.
UW Whitewater Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
As an Army ROTC cadet at Whitewater, you have the opportunity to develop into a great leader while learning and applying the Army values to your everyday life. Within ROTC, you have the chance to travel overseas in the CULP program to train with other militaries, attend many elite Army schools such as Airborne and Combat Diver, and you have the opportunity to attend conferences and guest lectures by some of the Army's top-ranking officers. Our Warhawk cadets participate in many extracurricular activities, Division III sports, Greek life, intramural sports, among many other team building and community service events. Being a cadet at Whitewater is more than just being part of the Army. It's also about being active members in our community and coming together to form a family atmosphere. Anyone who wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves while developing themselves professionally should consider UW Whitewater ROTC. To sign up for UW Whitewater ROTC, go to the 4th floor of McCutcheon Hall to room 417.
For the health and safety of those living on campus, all residence hall water fountains have been turned off. However, the refill component remains active, so students can fill up their water bottles hands-free.
Welcome back to Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from your regular daily schedule. Let's now move on into the Big East Conference and how we would shake this up. And Matt, we have one addition and one subtraction from this conference. And right now we're looking at Boston College, Butler, Creighton, DePaul, Georgetown, Marquette. Notre Dame would come back. Then it'd go back to Providence, St. John's, St. Paul, Villanova, and then rounding it out is Xavier.
Yeah, the two additions are Boston College coming from the ACC, and then Notre Dame also coming from the ACC, if you're talking in terms of basketball. And so I think this would be a really good addition because Notre Dame can play basketball in the Big East. And especially with Villanova being at the top of their game, they weren't Villanova as we've known them to be in previous years. If you talk about 5 years ago, they were the laughingstock of the Big East. And so now I think it can be a really interesting conference if you add Notre Dame and Boston College, because Notre Dame, although they were on the decline last season, they've been a pretty solid program.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the reason Villanova, like you said, has been on the uprise is because, one, they got Jay Wright. I mean, that was a great addition. But at the same time, there haven't been a lot of schools to really contest with them. There's been teams that have been in the upper echelon, but at the same time, there hasn't been a lot of teams that can really compete with Villanova day in and day out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, yeah, Seton Hall and Providence have given Villanova a run for their money a couple times during the season. But I think some of the other Big East teams haven't been able to get it done. And so one of the things I would also like to bring back is the old school Big East. I know that now it's the American Conference, but to really see UConn and Syracuse go at it in the Big East tournament, especially with how good Villanova is now, I think that would be a really more interesting tournament than what it is now.
Absolutely, yeah. If I'm being honest, I really miss the old Big East, the days when Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder will go up against people like Carmelo Anthony, who won the national championship with Syracuse that year. I really like the old times when it was West Virginia and Louisville were in the conference. I feel like basketball was at its peak, but the difference here is that all these teams are Catholic schools in this conference, except Boston College, and I think that it gives them a little bit more leeway in terms of what sport there is, and it gives Notre Dame, like you're about to say soon, a chance to be an independent.
Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why they're in the Big East, so they can play basketball, and then be independent from football. Although, for argument's sake, I would really like to see Notre Dame, if they were in a conference, be in the Big Ten. I know, obviously, being the Big Ten, they wouldn't have them in the Big Ten for football for obvious reasons, but if you would look at it, this would be a huge get for the Big Ten, because then you have two dominant powerhouses in Ohio State and Notre Dame, and this is how they can settle their differences on the field to get into the college football playoff. Because everyone around college football has been saying, oh, Ohio State doesn't have a quality win, or Ohio State's strength of schedule is not good. But if you were to put Notre Dame and they would play each other each season, I think that would be a great way for a lot of more attention, a lot more money, and you'd be able to get at least one team, maybe two, from the Big Ten in the college football playoff.
I agree. That'd be a great addition. And like we were saying earlier with the Big Ten, since there'd be 10 teams in that conference, you get every team a chance to play every other team in that conference. So that really shows who's the best team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and again, they would do that with the Big Ten championship game. And then you would have that criteria, which is one criteria that the committee looks at. And that's why when Ohio State won the national championship in 2015, that's how they got in, because they won the Big Ten. And so that's a big chip in the Big Ten champions' favor going into the playoff, because there's a huge difference from going into the college football playoff than to making a bowl game. And so I really think if the Big Ten wants to settle all doubters of how Ohio State's in there every year, or Ohio State doesn't have the strength of schedule, they don't play anybody good. Well, the Big Ten has been one of the best conferences, and so if you put Notre Dame, and especially because geographically they line up with teams like Indiana and Purdue, given that they're in Indiana. So it would make sense for them to be in the Big Ten for football.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, another conference shakeup coming your way right after this commercial break.
At the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, we're passionate about learning. Our talented faculty members blend teaching with research, creating hands-on learning experiences for students. Warhawk Pride thrives at UW-Whitewater, where student athletes excel on the field and in the classroom, where diversity is celebrated. A tradition of excellence. Find your passion here.
Video One Media Services provides accomplished students the opportunity to enhance their college experience by working with real-world clients. In addition, we provide clients local and affordable video options to better enhance their media needs. For more information on how Video One Media Services can help you with your next media project, email or call our office at 262-472-5659.
UW Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
Practicing social distancing is imperative to maintaining safety in the residence halls this year in lounges and common areas. For kitchens and laundry rooms, we have capped occupancy at 2 students in these spaces at any given time. Students will not be allowed to wait for their laundry in the laundry rooms, and if 2 students are already in the space switching laundry, please wait outside for one to leave. We ask that those using these spaces are efficient with their time, so all students have the option to use the common areas as needed. We thank you in advance for your cooperation.
Welcome back to Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from your regular daily schedule. Let's take a look at another NCAA conference we would restructure, the Big 12. And Matt, the Big 12, as you can see, these are the teams that we have in them. Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State. Adding to the mix is Missouri, then Nebraska, Oklahoma, OK State, Texas, bringing Texas A&M back into the Big 12, along with TCU and Texas Tech. What do you think of these teams so far in here?
Yeah, I like it, but I'll chime in one better. Add Missouri from the SEC, take Nebraska from the Big 10, take Texas A&M from the SEC, as you mentioned, and then you eliminate West Virginia. I really like how we're going to get into later, West Virginia being in the ACC. But again, I think this is great for the rivalries. I think that it's what college sports are all about. You have supremacy and you have bragging rights over your rival school, like the Red River rivalry. You got Nebraska back in there, so that's another showdown between them and Oklahoma. I really think this is great for all college sports involved, especially for football and basketball.
Yeah, I really like Big 12, especially what they've done, like you said, in basketball as well. I mean, there's just been so many great rivalries, like you said, have come through this chain of teams. And the nice thing is that they've been there for quite a bit. You mentioned the Red River Showdown in football, and Kansas versus Kansas State as well. I think Missouri also deserves to be in this conference. Like you said, it makes sense geographically. And I think Texas A&M should be here. I mean, they're one of the Texas schools. They should be in the conference since they have higher enrollment than teams like SMU. I think SMU is the only one that should be left out of the Texas.
Yeah, I would agree. And then obviously if you've got Texas and Texas Tech in the Big 12, then you might as well put Texas A&M back in there because obviously they're in that state. But again, they for football, I think they do there's a lot of good for Oklahoma then because you give them more quality wins, you give them better opponents, and then you obviously the Big 12 would then have 12 teams in it. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the Big 12 should have 12 teams, like we said with the Big 10 with 10 teams. And I think, especially with Big 12, one thing that I've really noticed these past few years, their basketball has really skyrocketed.
Yeah, especially with Baylor winning the national championship, Texas making the NCAA tournament, Kansas making the NCAA tournament. We know how good they've been with Bill Self. And again, I think it's only on the rise because a lot of top talent comes from Texas and the South, and especially when you've got teams like Texas A&M and Texas Tech, and then Texas A&M. I think it's really why the Big 12 is what it is and what it's been and how good it's been.
Yeah, the Big 12, in my opinion, is one of the premier leagues or conferences across the board. I would almost put them up in terms of basketball with the ACC. Now, the ACC did have a down year last year, but at the same time, Baylor was one of the top teams in the country, and it wasn't even Kansas, which is crazy to think because usually Kansas runs that conference.
Yeah, usually Kansas does, and now we've seen a changing of the guard between Kansas and Baylor, and now Baylor's taking the reins. As we saw previous years, Kansas was dominant throughout the Big 12. For decades, they were dominant in the Big 12. They won every single regular season title you could imagine, and I think that's why a lot of players now are just the talent is being dispersed a lot, and that's why you see a lot of kids in the transfer portal because they want to have the best place to succeed. And I think the Big 12 does that because not only in basketball but in football as well.
Yeah, Big 12 football is something to be reckoned with. And along the lines of basketball, we haven't even talked about Texas or Texas Tech yet. Texas Tech just went to the national championship in 2019, and they're one of those teams that can really give you a run for your money. And we saw the coach of Texas Tech, Chris Beard, end up going to Texas this year, and then Shaka Smart from Texas going to Marquette. Do you think that'll have an impact on how Texas can play basketball this year?
Yeah, I would. They're going to have to adjust. And again, I think Texas has done a great job of being good in the regular season, but not in postseason play. It's well documented how they've been upset in the first round a lot of times. And again, I think also Missouri coming into this conference does a lot good for them too because they're good in basketball and football.
Thank you for watching, and tune in next time to see more conference realignments. This has been Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from your regular daily schedule on UWW-TV.